All right, today we're jumping into a story from the ancient world that, honestly, it plays out like a high-stakes political thriller. We've got a terrified king, an invading army, and a divine message that would literally echo for thousands of years. We are diving deep into Isaiah chapter 7.
So right from the get-go, we're hit with this feeling of pure, unadulterated panic. The kingdom of Judah gets word that two enemy nations have just formed an alliance, and they're right on the doorstep. The scripture puts it so vividly. The hearts of the king and his people shook as the trees of the forest shake before the wind. You can just feel the terror. The entire nation is on the brink of collapse.
So, our story kicks off with a dangerous alliance. And it's really important to get this. This isn't just some abstract poetry. Isaiah's prophecy was a direct response to a very real, very high-stakes international crisis that blew up back in 735 BCE.
So here's the setup. You've got two kingdoms to the north, Aram, which we'd recognize today as Syria, and Israel, which is also called Ephraim in the text. They decide to team up, form a military pact with one simple goal: attack their southern neighbor, the kingdom of Judah. It's a classic power play, a real grab for regional dominance.
So let's just put ourselves in their shoes for a second. Imagine an existential threat is bearing down on you. Your enemies, they don't just want to win a battle, they want to wipe you off the map. What do? Do you try to make a deal with some global superpower? Do you trust in your own military? Or is there another option? This is the exact dilemma facing King Ahaz. Okay, so to really get what's going on with King Ahaz's choice, we gotta zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture. This crisis didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was part of a huge regional conflict, what historians call the Syro-Ephraimite War.
All right, so let's break down the key players in this whole mess. Think of it like a political scorecard. First, you've got King Ahaz of Judah. His goal? Super simple: survive. Then you have the coalition against him. Two kings, Rezin and Pekah, who've teamed up. Their plan is to kick Ahaz off the throne and force his kingdom to join their fight against the regional bully. And that bully, the giant looming over everyone, is the massive Assyrian Empire, which pretty much just wants to control everything. So what's Ahaz's brilliant idea? Well, it's a classic political power play. He's going to call up that superpower, Assyria, and basically pay them a ton of money for protection. I mean, it sounds kind of pragmatic, right? The biggest army wins. The only problem is, it's the exact, complete opposite of what God, through the prophet Isaiah, is about to tell him to do.
And this is where things get really interesting. We're moving into the second act now, God's counteroffer. While Ahaz is busy with his political maneuvering, the prophet Isaiah shows up, and he's got a message that's part comfort and part terrifying ultimatum. Okay, this is one of my favorite parts. Check out God's perspective on these two kings that have Ahaz completely terrified. Ahaz sees this unstoppable forest fire coming to burn him down. But God, he sees smoldering stumps of firebrands. He's basically saying, Ahaz, you are freaking out over two kings whose power is already burnt out. They're just smoking embers, not a raging inferno. What a difference in perspective.
And then Isaiah delivers this bombshell of a line. Now, what's so cool here is the wordplay in the original Hebrew. The word for firm in faith is tatminu, and the word for firm at all is teonmenu. They come from the very same root. The message couldn't be clearer. Your stability, your very existence as a kingdom, is directly connected to your stability in faith. If you don't trust me, you will not last, period.
But Ahaz, he's just not getting it. He's still completely paralyzed by fear. So God makes one last, incredible offer, which leads us right to the heart of this chapter, and, one of the most famous prophecies in the entire Bible. Just listen to how this conversation goes down. God basically says, Ahaz, ask for any sign you want. I mean, anything. From the depths of the grave to the heights of heaven, just ask and I will prove to you that I've got this. But Ahaz, in this moment of what seems like piety, says, oh, no, I couldn't possibly test the Lord. But it's totally a smokescreen. Why? Because he's already made up his mind to trust Assyria. Isaiah sees right through it. And you can feel his frustration. He says, fine, you won't ask for a sign, God's going to give you one anyway. And this is it. This is the sign of Immanuel. A child is going to be born, and his name itself will be the proof. You see, this isn't just some comforting little saying. It's a direct rebuke of Ahaz's lack of faith and a tangible promise that God is still present, even in the middle of this disaster.
Now this is where prophecy gets really fascinating, because it can work on multiple levels at the same time. For King Ahaz, right there in that moment, the sign had an immediate meaning. The Hebrew word used is almah, which just means a young woman who could get married. So a specific child would be born, and before that kid was old enough to know right from wrong, those two enemy kings Ahaz was so afraid of would be gone. But the prophecy also had a much longer-term fulfillment. Centuries later, the Gospel of Matthew quotes the Greek translation, which uses the word parthenos, meaning virgin, and applies this prophecy directly to the birth of Jesus Christ.
So, that name, Immanuel, what does it actually mean? It's Hebrew and it means God with us. That's it. That's the whole message, right there in 2 words. When you're facing down invading armies and political chaos, the ultimate sign, the ultimate source of real stability is the promise that God has not left you.
But of course, Ahaz doesn't listen. He rejects the sign of God with us, and instead chooses to put his trust in Assyria with us. And this decision, well, it has devastating and deeply ironic consequences.
The prophet Isaiah uses this really powerful metaphor. Ahaz thought he could just hire Assyria, like hiring a razor to neatly shave his enemies, Just a little trim, solve the problem, a clean, simple transaction.
But here's the punchline. That hired razor, it didn't just shave his enemies. It turned on him and shaved his own kingdom, Judah, completely bare, a symbol of total humiliation and defeat. The very power he paid to save him became the instrument of his nation's ruin. The irony is just staggering.
And the fallout from this decision? Oh, it was absolutely catastrophic. The Assyrian invasion was worse than any disaster the nation had ever faced. The Promised Land, the land of milk and honey, it became a wasteland of thorns and briars. The entire nation was decimated, and only a tiny, tiny remnant was left to try and pick up the pieces. All because their king chose to trust a foreign army instead of a divine promise.
So, after all that, what's the big takeaway? Why are we still talking about this ancient story of political failure and prophetic hope today? What's its enduring legacy?
I mean, the lessons packed into this one chapter are just huge. It's a masterclass in the battle between faith and fear, showing us that real stability comes from trusting God, not our own clever schemes. It's about divine sovereignty, that God is in control of history, even using powerful empires as his tools. It shows us that prophecy can be complex, with meanings for right now and for the distant future. And of course, it plants that incredible seed of Immanuel, God with us, a promise of hope that just grows and grows throughout the rest of the biblical story.
And that really just leaves us with one final thought, a question for ourselves. King Ahaz put his faith in the military might of Assyria instead of the promise of Immanuel. So when we face our own crises, big or small, what's our Assyria? What's that worldly power, that political fix, that financial strategy that we're tempted to trust in more than the simple, profound promise of God with us?